Welcome back to Namaste Node.js Season 2 and we are building Dev Tinder. In the previous episode, we saw how we can create different types of APIs. We created Get API, Post API, Patch API, Delete API, and we did a lot of amazing things inside our database. We pushed a lot of data into the database. We retrieved a lot of data from the database. We created the API, we sent the response, and we did a lot of amazing things. Now, in this episode, I have come back again, and now we will talk about validations on our database. See, right now, our database is very vulnerable. Whatever, I can just put rubbish into my database and it will accept, right? My APIs do not have validations. We are not doing any input sanitization. We are not checking whatever we are entering into the database. We are just literally littering our database with whatever data a user will send in the API, we are just putting it up in the database. We are going to see in this episode how you can make strict checks so that only valid data is entered into the database. There are multiple ways of doing that, multiple types of techniques and things which I will tell you. So just keep watching along with me and keep practicing along with me. Let us just get started now. So now if I go back to app.js, we have created a sign up API which signs up a user, which basically registers a new user onto our platform, right? And then we created a get API, post API, and all that stuff, right? So we are not worried about the get API, right? We are majorly worried about the post API because the post API and patch API are the ones, right? This post API and the patch APIs are the ones which are just inserting some data into the database, isn't it? The data, how will you insert data into the database? Either when the user registers onto your application or if the user is trying to update its profile. These are the two ways, right? These are the two APIs, post API and patch API, where you need to have strict checks. Got it? So now, even before putting some checks inside these APIs, we should add some checks inside the database itself, right? Inside the schema itself. So let us just open our user schema. So if you go to the model, if you go to user, right? Now we will add some strict checks over here in database. And if those checks are not met, then we will not insert the document into our database. Okay. This is just theory. Let me just explain you practically. But before that, let me also take you to the official documentation of Mongoose and tell you that what I am going to talk about, right? So if we go over here in official documentation of Mongoose, just go to schema types over here. This basically tells you more information about what can be different types that you can add inside your schema. So let me just give you an example. So suppose, right, let me just go over here. Suppose, see, if we want that, okay, there should be some mandatory fields in our database, right? There should be some mandatory fields. If those fields are not there, we will not create a user document, right? What can be these fields, right? Can you think about it? Yes, you are absolutely right. It can be email, it can be password, it can be first name, last name, right? These are kind of like required field. These are mandatory fields which are required to sign up a user, right? Suppose a user is signing up. You should at least know his first name, last name, email ID, password, right? Otherwise, how would you register a user onto the platform? So these are mandatory fields. So let us make our field mandatory. For that, if you will go to the documentation, you will find that you can add a required field over here. So this is one option that you can add required, and this takes a boolean, right? This takes a boolean over here or a function that returns a boolean, right? This is what it takes. But let me tell you how to add this required. So basically, suppose I want, if my user registers onto our platform, he should definitely have a first name and he should definitely have a last name, right? So these are the mandatory requirements. So let us add required over here. If I do required equal to true, right? If I add this required equal to true, now user will definitely have to give a first name. Otherwise, Mongoose will not allow the insertion into the database. Remember this sentence. If first name is not there, then Mongoose will not allow the insertion into the database, right? Insertion of document into the collection, right? That is what I am trying to say. So first name is required, last name, okay, sometimes in a lot of platforms you don't need a last name, right? So let's not keep the last name as required field, okay, but let us keep email id as the required field, right? Because email id is a very important field, right? You should be identifying your users by email id, right? Email id is a very crucial field for us, right? Similarly, password, right? So every user needs a password. So when a user is signing up, when a user is registering onto our platform, so they should definitely have a email id, password and a first name. And we can just keep age as optional, gender as optional, all the other things we can keep as optional, okay? So let's just insert our document and see if this works or not, okay? So suppose now I am registering this user Rohit Sharma. Suppose suppose I did not give my email ID, right? Suppose if I did not give my email ID, will it register my user? Will it insert this document or not? Right? Let us just hit the API and let me show it to you. If I hit the API, it says, see this, we got an error. It says error saving the user validation failed, email ID, path email ID is required. This is the error which Mongoose has thrown to us and said that email ID is a required field and you need an email ID to register a user into our database. Okay, so this is what it says. Now let me just add back my email ID. But what if I did not give the last name? Okay, let me not give the last name. What will happen now? Let me send it. It added successfully. Do you see this? The user was added successfully. Now, if I go to my database, if I refresh it, see this, Rohit@gmail.com and Rohit@123. This document has been inserted successfully into the database because all the required fields were present over there, right? So this is how you can add a required check into our schema. One more check that is very interesting is a unique check, right? It is a very important check. Suppose if I want in my database that, okay, there should be only one entry with one email ID. There cannot be two different users using the same email ID, right? That makes sense, right? Suppose if you are registering a new user, so you should at least check whether the user is not using the same email ID, right? So you might have seen the application. Suppose if you are signing up into an application, suppose if you are registering onto a platform, then if you are trying to create a new user, it can throw an error that, okay, this user already exists. A user with this email ID already exists. How will you build that kind of a feature? So basically, for that, you will have to keep your email ID as a unique field, right? If you will go over here in the documentation, you will see that, okay, over here you can also pass a unique flag. And this unique flag also is a Boolean flag over here. And I can just write unique true, right? If I will do unique true, right, what will happen now is it will not let me insert the same email ID into my database. Shall I try it? So if I hit send once again, it will say that, see this, it will say duplicate key error collection Rohit@gmail.com. It's a duplicate key error, right? There is already a key which is present with the same email ID. Got it? So now you cannot enter the, you cannot enter the same email ID, right? And, same email ID and create another user with the same email ID, right? This is the check which we have kept on the database level. Got it? Now, there can be more checks, but let me first test, right? See, if I do Rohit2@gmail, will it work? Let me send it. It should work, right? See this. This works because I have changed the email ID now, right? So, what I'm trying to say, the email ID should be now unique over here. Let me add you can go to the documentation and read more about a lot of things over here, right? all these schema types, all these schema options that you have, right? See, these are schema type options. There are multiple type of options that you can use, which will enhance and which will restrict the user to pollute your database. Okay, so these are very good checks that you have to keep on the database level. Now you can, let me just tell you a few more checks, right? Just to get you familiar with the things. Now, suppose I want to add a default value, right? So suppose if I want that, okay, whenever a user registers, so it should take some default value, right? It should take some default value in case of maybe a gender. Okay, I cannot assume a gender, right? I cannot enter a default value in the gender. I cannot enter a default value in age also. Okay, or maybe, okay, let us first of all add few more details about the user over here, right? Suppose if I want, suppose, see, when I will create a user schema, it will take my first name, last name, email ID, password, age, gender. Now it can also take a photo URL, isn't it? Photo URL. Let's also store a photo URL, right? This photo URL is basically the link to the photograph of the user, right? I can just enter string over here. Got it? So now my photo URL is type of string. Now what will happen? Let us also add some more field. Maybe there can also be a field of a short description, kind of like a about section. Or on the Instagram, you might have seen that bio or a headline on LinkedIn, something like that, right? That I am a software engineer at this company or something, right? That you can add. It is kind of like a short description about this user. So let us also add that field, right? And let us also add one more field, skills, right? Let us also add these fields, right? So our user collection will basically become very enriching, right? These are the information that I can add for our user, right? I can also take a skill. Now let me tell you one more interesting thing. Now this skill over here is skills, right? It can have multiple skills. A user can have JavaScript, a user can have React, a user can have lot of it is kind of like an array of skills, right? So how do you enter the array of skills? You write it like this, right? Let me just show it to you everything. It's an array of strings, right? So this is how it is. Now what I will do is, I was telling you that how you can use this default value. So you can add a default value for some users, right? You can add a default value. Suppose if you want to add a default value of about, right? So I can just add a default value like this, okay? I can add default, and over here, right? In the default, I can just add a default value, right? It's a string. So I can add, this is a default about of the default description of the user, or default about of the user. Okay, so I'm just entering a random default value. Got it? So now okay, so let me just test this out once. So suppose if I'm creating a new user, let's create a user, maybe Elon Musk. Okay, let's create a user Elon at gmail.com and Elon at the rate 123. Okay, so I have added this Elon user over here. Now let me just hit enter. So when I hit enter, it says user added successfully. Let me go to my database, refresh my database. And if you'll go over here and see, now we have got a default value of about over here, right? We got a default value of about over here. Now, you might also see that skills is an array, but this is an empty array. But let me tell you, this is not a mistake or some error, but this is a default behavior. Whenever you will have a schema with array of strings or something, right? So MongoDB by default creates a empty space for your array. Okay, so that's a default behavior. Don't worry about this. But what I'm telling you, that be concerned about this about section. That whenever a new user will register without an about section, right? Suppose if I don't pass an about over here, so the default about will be this about. So this is how you can set a default value for a particular field inside your Mongoose collection. Okay, so suppose if somebody is not entering any about thing, it is taking a default value over here. Similarly, what you can do, you can also add a default photo URL, right? So can I add a default photo URL? So dummy user photo image, right? Let's add some dummy user photo image. Okay, so maybe let's use some good image, right? Okay. Not this image, maybe a bigger image, full photo image, dummy user full photo image. So let us just add this maybe, right? So here we have this image, right? And if I open this image in new tab, what I can do, I can take this URL and let us just use this, right? I am just using this. I'm not copying, pasting, or using somebody's copyrighted image. This is just for educational purposes, okay? So don't you worry about it. So I can add a default image over here, default, and then I can set the default value as this photo URL. Now, if you don't give a photo URL, so by default, it will take this photo, okay? By default, it will take this photo. Now, let us go back and let me just hit enter one more, right? Let's enter Mark Zuckerberg, right? zook@gmail.com. Cool. So I am entering that user in the database. Now I hit enter. And then if I hit refresh over here, so you will see that now this Mark also has a photo URL coming in. Interesting, isn't it? This is how you can add default values, right? So just go over here, read about a lot of schema types. What else schema types can you add over here, and how you can make your database much more enriching. How you can make your schema of your database much more enriching, and try to implement all these checks. Let me also tell you one more validations kind of a thing, right? See, suppose if you want to, let me just show it to you. Let me show you the use case of this lowercase, okay? So suppose if the user is entering their email ID in a capital letters, right? Suppose, see, somebody entered the email ID as like this, right? ZUCK and then something like that, right? And inside random cases, right? Inside a random case. And then I can say 1, 2, 3 or something like that, right? And if it sends the user, it added the user successfully, but it added a random email ID. Do you see this? So to keep your email IDs consistent, I can add a lowercase flag into my email ID, isn't it? Right? It will be easier for us, right? If I do lowercase true, now whatever case the user may use, right? Suppose if the user is using this case, let me first of all delete this object. First of all, let me just delete this user. Okay, now let me hit that API once again. Okay, now you will see that the email ID would have been stored in a lowercase format, right? Whatever the user is sending, we will just store it how we want to. We want all my email IDs. I want all my email IDs to be unique. They should be always in lowercase. There should be, right? They should always be lowercase. This is a mandatory thing. So I will always add my email ID. So see, it should be lowercase. It should be required. It should be unique. I have added all the checks. Right? So I can add much more checks. Let me just tell you much more checks. See, there is a function for trim. So suppose, see, if the user is kind of sending an email ID with some spaces, right? Sometimes it happens, right? There are some spaces in the front and then there are some spacing in the back and front, right? Suppose if the user is sending this. Right now, if you save this, right? So see this. A new user was created with the same email ID but with spaces. So MongoDB treated this email ID as different, right? Let me just refresh the page. Do you see these two users? See these two users, right? Do you see these two users? See, the email ID over here contains a lot of white spaces in the front, lot of white spaces at the back, and the same email ID without spaces is there. So MongoDB treated this email ID with spaces as different than the actual email ID, right? So ideally, we should trim our email IDs before we save it, right? I don't want spaces in my email ID, right? And let me just delete this object for now, delete this document, and let me try to add it once again. It will throw an error. Why? Because now it is saying it is duplicate. So suppose if you are adding this user, let us add Zuck2, right? And then send the request. And if you will go and query it once again, so now you will see that no white spaces will be added to my email ID. So similarly, you can add a lot of these options to make your database much more safe, secure, and not polluted, right? And you are sure that what is going into your database, right? You can even check for, you can even check for min length. You can also add an enum, right? You can also add a min length over here. Let me just show you min length, right? So suppose if you want that at least your first name should be of a minimum length of, right? Minimum length of, min length should be at least 4 characters, right? My name should at least be of 4 characters. Now, suppose if I try to enter a user with 3 characters, MAR, right? And if I hit enter, it says that the path first name MAR is shorter than the minimum allowed length, right? It is saying that it is shorter than the minimum allowed length over here. Got it? So this is minimum allowed length 4. Got it? So this is how you can add much more validations. You can add validations for, minimum length, maximum length. Suppose the maximum length of the name should be, let's say, 255 or maybe 100, right? There should not be a name more than 100, or maybe I'm just putting a very lenient check. It should be 50 ideally, right? Why would a name contain more than 50 characters, right? Or maybe, right? I don't know, but you can keep it whatever you want to for yourself for the safety of your database, right? You can add a max length check on all the fields, right? So that your all these things are properly validated, right? Now you can try out a lot of things, right? You can try out for number also. So suppose if you have a number, right? If you have a type number, so where did we have number? Yes, in the age. Suppose if you have the type number, then you can add a min value and a max value. So suppose see on the age only, I want my users to be at least 18 years of age to sign up on DevTinder, right? So the age should be at least 18 years. So I can add minimum length should be 18 over here, right? Now remember that, okay, if it is a string, then we use min length. If it is a number, then we use min, right? Where am I getting this information? I'm getting it from the official Mongoose documentation. And why I am telling you and why I am referring this documentation again and again is because it is very important that you go read this documentation and try out these other functions also. These are very, very, very important. Got it? Now I can have a min length and I can also have a max length that, okay, people older than 50 years are not allowed on our platform, right? That is a very bad check to keep, but oh my God, let's not keep a bad check, right? Otherwise, cool. I should be respectful of elder people, right? They should also be, they are also developers. They can also come and over here find other fellow developers out there. Why not, right? So let's keep a min check over here. So this is how you do it, right? Basically, this is what I wanted to tell you. Now, suppose if I want to add some more complicated checks. Suppose if I want to check if my gender is either a male or a female or others, right? There can be only 3 gender types: male, female, or others. How do you check that, right? So basically what I am trying to say is I am trying to show you how to add a custom validation function. Okay, I am showing you how to create a custom validation function. Okay, how do you create a custom validation function? Let me just show it to you. You just have to write a function validate, right? Validate, and now this function takes a value, right? Takes a value, and over here, if the value, and now I can keep a check of a value over here. But before that, let me show you in the documentation. What is the documentation of validate? right? So there must be validate somewhere. Yes, over here it is. So validate should be a function. It adds a validator function for this property. So basically it adds a validator function. So now this is my validator function. Now I will check if my value is equal to male, right? Or let me only allow, right? If my value is not equal to male, okay, or let me write it in a better way, right? Let me just write it in a better way that if my value, right, is either a male or a female or others, right? If any of these strings dot includes my value, right? Basically, if the value of the gender, now listen to me very carefully and hope you understood what I am writing. So what I am trying to say, I am just checking if this array includes the value, right? Basically, if the gender value is either a male or a female or others, sorry, it is not I am putting a not, right? So basically what I am trying to write is if the value is not a male or a female or others, then just throw some error, throw a new error. And now I can just throw a new error that, okay, gender is not valid, right? Gender data is not valid. Gender data is not valid. Cool. So this is how you can add much more validations. Basically, you can, add this validate function for literally anything into your, in anything, right? Over here, you can add some complicated logic also, right? Suppose if, I can't think of a complicated logic right now, but suppose if you don't want some special characters in your about section, so you can add it, right? So you can do a lot of stuff, but you understood, right? This validate function basically, before, how this validate function works? As soon as the data is being put into the database, what I will do is, this validations will run, and the value which is being passed to the database will be first go through this validate function. If this validate function, right, does not throw any error, then everything works, right? The data will be inserted into the database. Otherwise, if this validate function throws some error, then your database will not be updated. Got it? So let me just show you how to use this function, right? But over here, let us just go. So we have signed up this Mark Zuckerberg already over here, right? Or now let us just update a user, patch a user, right? So this is the user I want to patch. Let us go back and let us patch Virat Kohli. Okay. So let us change the gender of Virat Kohli. Let us come back over here. So now I want to update the name of Virat Kohli, not the first name. Let us not update the first name. Let's update the age first of all, right? Let us update the age. So age should be 18. And what I will update is, I will update the gender, right? I will update the gender, and let's call this as random thing, right? Let's say the gender is hello, right? The gender is hello. So should it insert into the database? Will it insert or not? Tell me if I hit send. The answer is no, right? Sorry, the answer is yes. This data will be successfully inserted. Let me show it to you. Yes. So user updated successfully. User updated successfully. So now it should not have happened like this, right? Let me just rephrase it. I added a validation over here. But now my validations are not working. See, I was able to pass in gender over here. So why it did not work is because by default, this validate method will only be called when this new document is created. Suppose if this object was not there, right? Suppose if Virat Kohli was not present in the database and we were inserting a new document, right? Suppose if we were signing up. So let me just show you an example. Suppose if I am signing up a new user, let me call this user as, maybe let us call this user as, right? Let us call this user as maybe Rahul Dravid, right? Rahul. And we have the email ID as Rahul Dravid.com, right? And now I am trying to insert the gender over here, gender, and over here if I pass in hello, right? Suppose if I am doing this, right? Now if I send it, now my validation function will run and it will say gender data is not valid. So what I am trying to say is this validate function will only run when you are creating a new object. But suppose if I am trying to update or I am trying to patch an existing data, this validate function will not run by default. You will have to enable it to run on updates also. How do you enable it to run on updates? First of all, let me show you in the documentation, then I will code it into my code, right? So let us go back to the update method. How will you find the update method? So what update method are we using in the patch API? Where is our patch API? This is the patch API. We are using find ID and update. Find by ID and update. Let us go to find by ID and update. Where I will find this? In the API, I will go to model. And in the model, I will find by ID and update, right? So if you go in find by ID and update, here in the options, you will find run validators. I told you in the previous episodes, you will have to check about these options. Hope you have already checked this, but this run validators over here means that by default, see, run validators is off when updating the document, right? Suppose if I'm updating the document, right? Suppose if I am updating an existing user data, right? Then the validations do not run. Suppose if I am changing the value of this user over here, let us use the object ID over here, right? So if I am inserting the value of for this user, right? Virat Kohli, I am trying to change the email ID, age and gender, right? The validation function will not run by default, but if I run validators true, if I pass run validators true over here, then it will run. So basically if I'll do run validators, then this will basically run the validations whenever this update method will be called. Okay, I'll have to explicitly allow this run validators. Okay, so let us try to change the data of this user. This is the user Virat Kohli, and over here the gender is hello. I want to insert suppose some other gender over here, right? Let me just insert let's say test, right? If I send it, it will say something went wrong. Why it is saying something went wrong? Yep, it is saying because it failed over here and it went to the catch block, right? It failed the validation and it went to the catch block. Now let me also print the error message so that you know, right? Update failed, right? Let me just write a better message over here. Update failed, and let us also pass in err.message. Okay, so I'm passing in the message. Let us call this once again. Now I will get a better message over here, right? So if I send it, okay, so something bad happened, right? Okay, server started successfully. Let me send it. Okay, why? The app crashed. The app crashed. Why? Invalid status code update failed. Why? Invalid status. Okay, sorry, I have put comma over here. I should not be putting comma plus. Okay, plus. Cool. Now what I will do is let me go back and hit send. Now it says that, see this, update failed, gender data is not valid. Right? Now I am not able to insert test, but if I insert mail over here, if I send it, now my validation successfully passed and the data was updated onto the database. Earlier it is hello. Now if I will refresh this, it changed to mail over here. So this is how you can add your custom validations, right, onto your user schema. You can add your custom validations onto your schema over here, right? Amazing, isn't it? So now what we did right now is We have seen a lot of things. I have seen how to make required, we have seen min length, we have seen max length, we have seen lowercase, required, unique, trim, we have seen how to add a custom validator, we have seen how to add default values, we have seen how to add arrays. Okay, we have not used these skills, right? So let us also update the skills of this Virat Kohli. Okay, so let us update the skills of the Virat Kohli and let us test if it is working fine or not. So in the skills section, I can just pass an array of objects, array of strings, sorry, and I can add, okay, JavaScript. Virat Kohli knows JavaScript. And let us also add cricket, right? Virat knows cricket. Why this is giving me an error? Cricket, right? And Virat's skill is batting, right? Batting. Cool. So now let me send it. User was updated successfully. If I go back and if I refresh the database, now you will find that there are 3 skills which are there in the Virat's object, right? Virat's document. Got it? Do you see this amazing thing? This is amazing, right? Now we have understood a lot of things over here, right? Now I just want to give you some homework, but before giving you homework, I want to tell you the last thing in terms of putting validations in the database schema. Last thing is, right now I am not storing anywhere that when this user was registered. I am not storing any timestamp, I am not storing any date, I am not storing anything that when was Virat registered onto our platform. So how can you add that? Right? Let me tell you how can you add that. You can simply add that very easily in MongoDB. Let me just tell you. Me first of all tell you in the documentation, then I will tell you in the theory, right? Over here in the code. If you will go in the documentation, go over here in the timestamps. If you will go in the timestamps, it will tell you that you can pass something like timestamps is equals to true over here, right? Just like you were passing inside the schema, I was creating a user schema, a new schema. I can just pass in timestamp is equal to true and this will work, right? So how I am telling you is, see this. Over here you are passing this object, passing all the types. Now you can pass another argument. And over here, if you write timestamps is equals to true. So now MongoDB, see, now what I am doing? The first thing is I am defining the user over here, first name, last name, email ID, and all of them. Now the another object is timestamp equal to true. Now MongoDB will add a created at and an updated at for the user, for every user that registers onto our platform. By default, it will add it. You don't have to add extra field. Some people would say that, okay, Akshay, I can add created at over here and I can add a type of date, right? You can even do this, right? If you want to do this, if you are interested to do this, you can do this, right? Type of date over here, right? Created at, and then you can type of date. And whenever you are inserting a document, also pass this created at. But you don't need to do this. You don't need to do this. Mongo is giving you an amazing thing. Timestamps is equals to true. Now let me just show it to you. Okay. Let me create a new user and I will show it to you how that works. Okay. Let us sign up a new user and let's sign up. Maybe let's say I'm signing up Alia Bhatt. Okay. Let's sign up Alia BHATT, right? BHATT at the rate something, right? At the rate gmail.com. Okay. And now let us also add the last name, right? Let us add the last name, and let's say it is BHATT Bhatt. And then what I can do is I can also add a password. I can, let's say Alia at the rate 123. I'm not passing in any gender as of now. I'm just registering this user with first name, last name, email ID, password, right? These are the mandatory fields. And now if I send this, user added successfully. If I go back to my database, if I refresh it, I will show you an amazing thing that, do you see this? Created at and updated at was automatically added. Created at and updated at was automatically added, and these are one and the same thing. See, both the timestamps over here are one and the same thing, right? These are the same things. Okay. Now These two timestamps are exactly the same, but let us just update the document, and once I update the document, you will see that updated at will change, right? Once I update this object, let me just copy this object ID. Let us go back, call the patch method, update the skills of Alia Bhatt. Let us update the gender and let's say female. And let me add some skills, maybe acting and maybe drama and maybe JavaScript, right? Everybody on our platform knows JavaScript, okay? So let us just update these skills. If I send it, okay, the validation failed. Why the validation failed? Gender is female, female. Gender data is not valid. Let us go back and let me just check the function. Okay, my typo. Okay, this is, I wrote a spelling mistake over here, female. Okay, so let me save it up. Let us go back, try it once again. It should work now. If I send this, it says user updated successfully. If I go back, if I refresh the document over here, now you will see the gender is female and updated at, and it's a very different updated at. See, it was 1642, now it is after 2 minutes 1644. Got it? So this is what I'm trying to say, is that by using this timestamp, right, by using this second argument or second object over here, timestamp equal to true, it automatically adds timestamps. And it is very, very, very required to add timestamps, right? Because you should know the user, when the user was registered, when the profile was updated, and you should know all these information, right? It will be very handy. It will be very handy for us when we will build our application. There would be times when I would have to sort them by the registered date, or maybe I have to filter that, okay, I want all the users who have come in the last 7 days, right? Who have registered onto our platform from in the last 7 days. So I would need to query on this created at and updated at, isn't it? Suppose if I want to find all the users who were registered in a particular date range. So these values will be very helpful over there, and these values are very helpful in sorting and searching and a lot of other places, right? It is always good to keep timestamps, right? Always make it a habit whenever you are creating a schema, always keep these timestamps. It becomes very handy. It's good, right, to keep the timestamp. Okay. Now I have added, and now my schema looks much, much better, right? Earlier my schema was looking very, very, very basic, right? Now we have added a lot of things inside our schema. If you will see the changes over here, we have done a lot of changes over here in our schema, and now my schema looks much, much better. And now we are also getting confidence that, okay, people will not come and pollute our database randomly, right? Suppose if by mistake somebody has entered a space in their email ID, I know that my database will trim it. It will not just store it randomly. It will always store in lowercase. I can, and your homework is to also add these kind of validations for all the field over here. Every field can have a validation, right? Put all these validations, what should be the default value, minimum length, maximum length. These are the basic things that should always be there on your database level, because users, you don't know anything. User can just add, suppose if you are not adding a min length and a max length, then user can just push in a lot of random stuff into your into your database, which you really did not want, right? So that is why you should be very cautious about these checks. Now, let me give you the homework, and then I will take a break, and then, you do it on your system, and then you will have to come back. But what I will give you is the same things. You will have to explore schema options, explore schema type options from the documentation, right? Then the second thing is add a required unique, explore required unique, lowercase, uppercase, min, min length, right? Min length. And what else did we use? We use required unique, min length, trim. What else did I use? Did I use, okay, I use default, right? Set default value, right? Add default value, right? Create a custom validator, custom validation function, validate function for maybe create a custom for gender, right? So you can do a lot of things over here. You know, and then improve the database schema, right? This is the last thing. Improve the DB schema, right? Over here in improve the DB schema, find out and improve the put all the validations, whatever validations you can think of. Uh, Put all validations on, put all required appropriate, sorry, let me call this as appropriate validations on each field, right, in schema, right? So basically improve your database schema, put all the validations that you can think of for all these values over there, right? Minimum length, maximum length, trim wherever required, and a lot of other things. If it is required or not, it should be unique or not, and all the other things. Just do it, and then also add timestamps to the schema, right? To the user schema. Right? So these are important things. You should know all of it. Please do this homework and come back once again, right? Come back once again and it will just, cool. So this is your homework. I am pushing these things, right? Schema validations, right? So come back once again, and you know what we will do? Then we will talk more about API level validations, and then we will see a lot more other cool stuff. So this is your homework for now. Pause the video right away over here and then go explore, practice, right? Go explore the documentation. You just don't have to believe on my whatever I have taught you. You have to believe on the documentation. Explore the timestamp documentation. Explore the schema and schema type documentation over here. Try to read it up, right? Make a habit of reading this documentation and you will get a lot of amazing concepts over here. Right? So this is how you do it, right? I would just want to get you started with all of it, and I want all my students to be very good at reading the documentation. Please do that, right? My focus on this episode and all these episodes is to make you good at reading documentation also, because if I can put the seed of reading the documentation in your head, then that seed will grow as a plant, and then they will make a habit of reading the documentation, not just of Mongoose, but of other libraries and other frameworks also, right? So please become like that. That's all. So see you after a short break. So bye-bye for then. Welcome back, my dear friends. Hope you have added the validations on your DB schema. Now let us just go ahead, and now I will show you some API level validations also, right? When do you say API level validations? What does it mean by that, right? So let me just show you first of all what is the problem with our APIs, right? So the problem with our APIs is, suppose somebody is signing up onto our platform. When the user is signing up, I don't need all the information about the user. I don't need all the information. I don't need its age. I don't need its skill. I don't need its random other things, right? I don't need its photo ID. I don't need a lot of other things, right? So what I will do is, I just want to take 4 fields. So think about a UI where you have a sign up form which asks for your first name, your last name, your email ID, your password, and it just logs you in, or it just signs you up for the application, right? The other thing is, suppose if the user, right? Suppose if, let me also tell you one more important thing about it, right? So suppose over here, we had this object, right? Suppose, let me just show it to you, okay? So this is an object, okay? Alia Bhatt, okay? So suppose if I am updating this document, now suppose if I try to update the email ID, right? If I try to update the email ID over here, will I be able to do it? Just tell me. Suppose if I update the email ID of Alia Bhatt to alia@bhatt.com. Suppose if I have added a new email ID over here, now what will happen is, Suppose if I added a new email ID over here, alia at the rate bhatt.com. If I send it, it will update it, right? And now my email ID is also updated. If I refresh it, my email ID is updated. But what if I don't want my user to be able to change the email ID once it has registered? Because it will be a very big problem for us, isn't it? You might have seen there are so many platforms. When you will go over there, they will not allow you to change your email ID, because email ID is a very sensitive thing. Suppose you created an account with, suppose I created an account with uh, Akshay at the rate namastedev.com, or maybe Akshay at the rate seni.com, right? I created a dev Tinder profile. I sent the connection request to like random people, right? Once those people accepted my connection request, then I changed it from Akshay at the rate gmail.com to Virat Kohli at the rate gmail.com. And I changed my photo, I changed everything. And now there is no way for the people to figure out that I can completely change my identity, right? So, email ID is a very important thing. I might not want people to change it, right? Basically, suppose if the user was signing up for the first time, they have given me some email ID. Now, email ID changes not allowed, right? Email ID changes not allowed. So you can keep this type of things, right? So how do you add these type of checks if you really want to? So let us do that, right? So let us take this example, and suppose I don't want my email ID to be changed when I am updating my user, right? Suppose if I am updating my user, I don't want this email ID to change the email ID on the database. How can I add it? I'll have to put a API level validation. I'll have to put a API level validation. The problem, the problem with our code also is, suppose see, if I pass in XYZ over here, right? If I pass in XYZ, I'm just passing in random data. All of this, right? Still, my API is not sanitizing my data. It is just, if you send it, it just says user updated successfully, right? It just, whatever you pass in, everything is allowed. So I want that, suppose if the user is updating its profile, it can only update certain fields of the profile. Okay, it can update only certain fields on the profile. How will you add that type of validation? Let me just try to show it to you. You can, you will have all the control in your API over here. This is the patch API. Now, what I want in my request.body, if my email ID is coming, then ignore it. I don't want my email ID to be updated. Got it? So I can write some logic over here. Right? Let me just first of all write some basic logic. Suppose I say allowed update, allowed updates, right? Allowed update, right? Allowed updates. What kind of fields can be updated? So I can just restrict, that you can only change your photo URL. Suppose if you want to change your photo URL later, you can change it. If you want to change your about, right? If you want to change your about, you can change it. Do you want, if you want to change your gender, you can change it. If you want to change your age, you can change it. Or, you can even keep it stricter that, okay, I will not let the user change my age later on, right? I will not let the user change the age later on. You can keep that type of things, but I am just allowing all these updates. So suppose I only want my user to be able to change these things, nothing else. It should not be able to change the email ID. It should not be able to change the first name, last name. Once the user signs up with a name, with an email ID, it is fixed, right? You cannot change it now. How do you do that? So I will now basically validate my request body, right? I will now validate my request body, this data that, so let me just write some function is allowed, right? Is update allowed. Right, is update allowed, right? Is update allowed. And what I will do is I will just do object.keys, right? And I will pass in this request.body, or maybe the data, right? Whatever the data is coming in, I will just loop through these keys, and then I will check for every, right? If all of the data, whatever I am passing in, if every, and I can take a key, and for each key, for each key, my allowed updates dot includes, right? Includes that key. Let me just write it down. I will explain what I'm doing, right? So basically, what I am checking is for data, right? Suppose the data is this data, right? Let me just copy paste this data. Now what will happen is, see, this is pure JavaScript, right? This is pure JavaScript. So I am not doing anything fancy over here. Let me just explain you what I'm doing. I'm just looping through each of these keys, right? I'm just looping through each of these keys, and I will make sure that every key is present in the allowed updates. So what it will do is it will check one by one. Is user ID allowed over here? Yes. So I want my user ID to be present, right? Because user ID is important, right? I am using this user ID. User ID is allowed. Email ID allowed? No, this email ID is not allowed over here. Gender allowed? Gender is allowed. Skills allowed? Yes, let us also allow skills. Skills, right? And then I will also check XYZ allowed? It's not allowed, right? So if any of this is not allowed, then my is update allowed will be false, right? It will check for every key should be included in my allowed updates. If any of the key over here is not present over here, then I can just throw my error. If my not is allowed update allowed, then I can just throw a new error. Like I can just throw new error, right? Or maybe let's not throw new error. Let me just respond from here only, right? I can just respond from here. Respond dot maybe, you know, I can just say respond dot status, right? I can add the status and I can just add 400 and I can say update not allowed, right? Or something like that, right? Update not allowed. And I can just say send over here, right? Send. Cool. So what I will do is now if I am sending random fields over here, my update will not be allowed, right? My update will not be allowed if I am sending random fields over here, right? If I will send the data now, so it will say update not allowed. Why? Because I am sending random things. Let me just remove this XYZ because I don't need XYZ. And I also can't update my email ID, right? But can I update user ID, right? I should not even be allowed to update my user ID also, right? How can you allow this user ID to be updated? But we will fix this later on. There is a reason why I have kept this user ID over here, right? But I should not be allowed user ID also. But these fields are allowed. If I hit on send, oh my God, did it crash? Okay, something crashed. Why it crashed? Cannot set headers after they are sent to client. Yes, okay. So I am trying to, okay. I got it. So basically I am just sending this status of 400 from here. Ideally, I should do all of this inside my try catch block, right? Let me do all of this inside my try catch block, okay? Let me do all of this inside my try catch block, okay? Let me do all of this inside my try catch block, and instead of sending this response from here, I should ideally be throwing a new error. Right? Throw new error, right? Error, update not allowed. So what will happen is if this update is not allowed, the catch will catch it and update will fail, right? So it will handle it properly. I think now it should work properly. Let us go back, hit send, and it says user updated successfully. Cool. Now my user is updated successfully. If I go back, if I find it, then my user is updated successfully. If I try to add some random stuff over here, right? If I try to add a field XYZ and try to make an invalid data entry over here, so this update will not be allowed. If I hit send, it says update not allowed. Got it? So this is a strict check that you can keep. Right? Now let us also fix this important thing that user ID should not be allowed over here, right? I do not want to change my user ID, but I somehow want my user ID over here, right? I would want my user ID. Otherwise, I need my user ID, otherwise how would I fetch that which document will I update, right? So instead of getting my user ID from my body, I can get my user ID from the URL also, right? Right? Later on, going forward in the future episodes, I will use, I will use cookies. I will use the headers to fetch this user ID. Don't worry about that. But for now, I am not doing that, right? I am just keeping this user ID. Let me just use this user ID. And suppose if I have to update this user, let me pass in over here. Do you know how to handle it? Do you know how to handle it? So over here, what I will do, I can just write like this, right? You know how I am handling it. I can just say user and this user ID. And now my user ID will come from request dot params dot user ID, right? And it's a good thing to keep this question mark over here. Okay, so that if the user ID is not present, your code will not fail, right? So request.params.user ID will come from this user ID and everything else. Now I can just remove user ID from my allowed updates also, and I don't even need to pass in user ID from here. Now if I send it, my update is not allowed still. Okay, XYZ is here, right? Let me just change it up, and let me also add the age, and let's add the age to 18, right? Let's add the age to 18, and let's keep the female over here, and let's change the skills to React, right? React, and maybe let's remove this React and JavaScript. Okay, so this is the update which I am making. Now let me just hit send. Now my user updated successfully. If I go back, refresh the page, if I go over here, I will see my age is 18 and the skills array has 2, React and JavaScript. Cool. So this is the API level validation. So basically, whenever you are getting a body from the request, always validate it, always sanitize it, always do a lot of amazing things, right? Always make sure that you are very much sure what is being entered onto your database. We can keep a lot more checks, right? Suppose a user is trying to add like thousands of skills over here, right? Suppose if the user is trying to add like, so many strings, right? I can add it, right? Like this. Can I add it like this? Let me just copy it, and let me just paste it, right? So see this. I can just keep adding this. And if I save it, and if I send it, now see this. If you will go over here, if you refresh the database, I am allowing, 110 skills, right? I am allowing 110 skills. So, can you add a validation for this? This is your homework, right? Can you add a validation for this? You should basically add validation to almost everything. Never trust the user data. User or attackers can attack your API, send the malicious data, and your DB can break, right? The malicious, right now I have just sent 110 array objects, right? I have 110 strings. What if the user is sending 1 million inside this? What will happen to your database, right? There could be a problem, isn't it? So that is why I'm saying you should always sanitize everything. Always. You can add a validation at the DB level also, or you can also add the validation right here itself, right? When I have got this data over here, I can just check, right? If my update allowed, or I can also say, if my data dot skills dot length is greater than 10, so throw an error, right? Throw new error, right? Throw new error. And what I will do, throw new error, and the error is skills cannot be more than 10. Okay, skills cannot be more than 10, right? You can only add 10 skills, right? Maybe I can add it, right? Now let me just send it. It will say skills cannot be more than 10. If I am adding 10 skills over here, it should work perfectly fine, right? So these are the checks which I am trying to say that, okay, always Always, now the user is added successfully. Always keep such checks, because you should never ever trust the user data. They can put anything right into your database. That is why I am using Postman. Sometimes when we are building the UI, we just feel that, okay, users will use UI. But no, attackers will misuse your APIs. Your backend is very vulnerable. You can never leave your backend less secured, right? Maybe you don't have UI validation, that is still okay. But always have backend validations. Always have backend validations for each and every field. You should have validations for photo URL. You should have validation. What if in the photo URL somebody started sending random things, right? So you should have validations for a lot of things. Got it? Now, let me tell you one more important thing. There is one small portion which is left in this episode, right? I will come back and explain you that. But what I want is, first of all, you have to let me add a homework for you, right? You have to add API level validations on patch request, right? Patch request and put request. Sign up, put API. Post API. Not put API, post API. Okay. And then add, API validations for each field. Cool. So this is your homework, and please do that. I have just added few validations. Try to add yourself. The more code you write, the better you will be. And try to make sure that I cannot break your API by sending malicious data from here. Your API should be 100% safe. Each and every field should be well sanitized. This is known as data sanitization. Okay. This is known as data sanitization. Data sanitization. Basically, you are sanitizing the data before entering into the database. Got it? Now, there is last small thing which I wanted to add. API level data sanitization. Okay. There is last thing which I want to cover in this episode, right? Just come back very soon, finish this homework and come back very soon over here, and let us just finish that up very quickly, and then we will move to the next episode. Okay. So see you very soon. Take a pause, do this homework and come back. Welcome back, my dear friends, and hope you have added API level validations in your code, right? Hope you have added the schema level validations, API level validations, and now your APIs are looking very much secure, isn't it? Now your APIs are looking very much secure. But still, you have to do a lot of work. Let me just tell you, right? See this. Suppose if I click on sign up, and if I try to create a user, and let's say I'm creating a user, maybe let's say Akshay Saini, right? I am adding myself into first of all, okay, let me just clear all these objects, right? Because see, these users have a lot of random data. Our database is very bad. So how do you clear this? You can just drop this collection. I'm dropping this collection, right? It will delete all the documents, right? Do it very safely. And on production, we never do this, okay? So, but I am just testing it out. So I'm deleting everything. Now I don't even have my database over here. But as soon as I add a user, right? Let me just add a user, right? Now, if I am adding a user, akshay@gmail.com, and if I add a user, so my database will be created. Let me refresh, right? And a user will be added, right? Now my Akshay Saini is over here. But what I am trying to say is, suppose if I am adding a user and I did not pass a correct email ID, right? Suppose if I pass the email ID as a string, right? Let me say that, okay, I am passing my email ID as my username, right? I have passed this, right? If I send it, user added successfully, and your data is added over here. If you have not put validations, it will be a bad job for you. Hope you had already added the validation in the homework that you did. But now let me tell you that to validate email ID is not an easy job, right? You will have to find out whether that email ID has a @ or not, whether that email ID has a .com, .in, .gmail or whatsoever, all the things, right? It is very tough to write a validator for your email IDs, right? So what I am telling you is that for validations, you can take help of an external library also. And there is a very famous library. Let me just show it to you. NPM library, which is known as validator, right? This is a very, very famous library and I have used it a lot and there are millions of people who use it. Do you see this? There are see 12 million weekly downloads. 12 million weekly downloads. Oh my God, right? This is insane, right? So you can use this, right? You can use this validator library and you can validate your email very easily. See this validator.is email, and you pass in the data, it returns you true if it is a correct email. Right? It validates a lot of things, my dear friends, and it will make your life very, very easy. That is why I wanted to introduce this to you at the last, right? You can validate your lot of data by just using this this library. Okay, so let me just copy it and let me just install this. How do you install it? Npm install and validator. Let me just copy paste this npm I validator, hit enter. It will install validator in our package.json. Right now, over here I have added validator. Right, let me just go back. Let me show you how we can use it. How to use it, you already know that. Okay, you have to call this validator.is email. So it will return true or false. So what will I do is, now let me go back to schema. See, I can either add a API level validation or I can also add a DB level validation. So I am adding a schema level validation for now. You can also add a API level validation if you wish to, right? But if I have to add a DB level validation, how would I do that? Let me just show it to you. Okay, so first of all, let me go to email ID and over here I will write my validate function, right? I can write my validate function, right? And in that validate function, I can just get this value. This value will be the email ID. And if my, now I can write this, if my validator.is email, right? So how will I get my validator? First of all, let me require validator constant validator tor is equals to require validator. Right now I've got my validator. Now I will just say validator dot is email, right? It gives you a lot of methods. Is email, and if my value is an email and a not, right? If my validator dot is email is false, if it is not true, then just throw an error, right? Throw new error and say invalid email address, right? Address. Got it? So invalid email address, and it is just sending you the value back. Cool. So now I have added this validation, right? So let us go back and try to run this API call once again. Okay, I cannot call it. Okay, I have not started the server. Npm run dev. Okay, so I have started the server. Now my server is running. If I send the API call, it says this invalid email address Akshay March 7, right? If I have Akshay March 7, or if I need to give a valid email ID, right? Valid email ID, valid email ID @gmail.com. Okay, so see, you don't have to write the all code of checking the validation of email ID, right? Because you will have to check the pattern, whether @ is there or not, whether the dot is there or not, whether there are no random things, all those other things you don't have to care about. If you just have the successful, you have a good email ID, it will just validate it automatically. It makes your life very, very easy, isn't it? Right? And you can validate a lot of things from here, right? Just go and check. It validates a lot of things here. It can even validate whether, see, you can even validate that your profile photo URL should be an actual URL. Maybe suppose somebody started giving a string or a text into your photo URL. You don't want that. You want an URL, right? So is data URI in the data URI format. Okay, just check this. What is data URI format? right? See, this is data URL. No, I don't want this type of a format. No, I don't want that. I want is URL. Is there a function for is URL? Is URL, is there a function? Yes, see. Here we have a is URL function. So it will just check if the string is URL or not, right? So let us just check over here in the photo URL and let us just add a validate, and I can just, maybe let us just copy paste from here, right? It will make our life easy. Okay, let us just copy paste over here. So do you see this? How easy our job has become. I will just check is URL, right? If it is my URL, if the value is URL, invalid photo URL, right? It is your invalid photo URL, right? Now suppose, sorry, URL, right? I think it's capital L. Yup. So now I have added this up. Now if I go back, if I try to update my data, okay, let us just go back to my documents first of all, and let us try to update the photo URL over here. This is geography.com, right? So let me just change the photo URL. Let me just change the photo URL. How will I change this? First of all, let me take this object ID, right? And over here, let me go to the patch. I am added the user ID, and now I want to add more data over here. Photo URL, right? Photo URL, and is the name correct? Is the name correct? Okay, it's like this. Let me just copy paste over here. And now if my photo URL is some random text, it should not work first of all. And let me give a gender of male and an age of 20 and some skills, React, JavaScript, and maybe let's call this as front end. Got it? And now if I'm sending it, it will say validation failed, photo URL is an invalid photo URL. Right? I have to give a photo URL over here, right? So let us give, okay, let us give a valid URL, HTTPS, right? Let us take a valid photo URL. How will I take a valid photo URL? Let me give my photo URL over here, right? Akshay Seni. Let me go to my website. Oh my God, where is my website? Yes, here. I will find my photo, right? This is my photo. Open image in new tab. I know this is a very bad photo, but let me give this photo URL, right? If I give this photo URL, let us see if this works or not. Okay, so I have added this photo URL, send it, and it says user updated successfully. And if I refresh the page, my photo URL has been changed successfully. Similarly, you can add a lot of type of validations using this validator. It can even, it can even check if it is strong password or not. Okay. It can even check if it is a strong password or not. You can add validation to your password also. Okay. So let me just add validation to the password. Okay, sorry. Validations to the password. How do you check? Let me just add the validators, right? Is strong password. Is strong password. And I would say your password is not strong. Enter a strong password. Enter a strong password. Okay. If your password is strong, only then it will allow you to enter, right? Otherwise, it will fail. Right? And what is the meaning of strong password according to this? Just read the documentation. See, it should have a minimum length of 8. It should have minimum lowercase. It should have one minimum uppercase letter. It should have one number. It should have one symbol. It should have some things, right? Just see this. Read the documentation for everything. Right? You will understand what it is trying to do. Right? So let me just show you the demo of strong password also. Let us go back. When I'm signing up, let us sign up using a new email ID. Let's say Elon Musk is signing up on our platform. Elon Musk, right? And then the email ID is elonmusk@gmail.com. And the password is alia @ or maybe let's say Trump @123. So will it work? If I send it, it says enter a strong password. Trump is not a strong password. Okay. So, okay, so email ID, enter a strong password. So basically the password should be capital one. There should be one capital. There should be one small, minimum length, and there should be one. I think this should work, right? Send. Cool. The user added successfully because it matched all the password criteria that it had, right? It should have one symbol, it should have a uppercase, lowercase, and all these things were here, right? Actually, this is not a very strong password, but still, according to this validator, it is a strong password, right? So you can keep it. Cool. So now, this is how your validations become easier. You can add a lot of validations. You can see, you can check if it is a numeric, if it is a mobile number. Do you see this? If it is a mobile number, right? If it is a, you can check is length. You can check if it is a latitude, longitude, if it is a JW2 token, is the data is JSON. You can check a lot of things, right? And you just can't use it over here. You can also use it while validating data in your APIs, right? So these are the data, these are the validations on the schema level, right? These are the validations on the schema level, but you can also check other portions of your data if you wish to. You can use this validator functions in your code also. When we will go ahead and build more features into our application, we will come across some use cases when we will need these type of validations. But what I wanted to teach you is that there is a validator library already. You don't have to write validations for everything on your own manually. So please use these libraries. And this is the benefit of open source, isn't it? Open source is amazing. Somebody else wrote the validator code and now we are just importing it. We are just using it. Right? That is how amazing it is. So the last portion of your homework is to install validator, and then the second thing is use validator functions, explore, right? Explore the validator library, explore validator. You should explore the validator functions also. You should first of all know what are all these functions, what type of things I can just use it, right? It also helps you with sanitization also, right? Just read this documentation. This documentation is really very interesting, right? So explore validator library functions, right? Functions, and use validator functions for password and then email, and then what else did we use it for? Password, email, and URL, right? Photo URL. Okay. So please do that, right? It will help a lot to keep our data very much valid, right? To keep our data sane, right? So we have done this. Let me just add it. So my commit message is exploring validator library, right? And then I can just commit things up, sync the changes. Okay. Now we have added the validations. This episode was all about data sanitization, validations. You know, when you will go and check other Node.js courses, not a lot of people put this much effort and this much time in teaching you validations. But I want all my users, see, I am not teaching you very basic ground level projects. I am teaching you the good and standard coding practices, which is followed in the industry. And I am trying to make your app secure. This is very, very important step to keep the security of your website and your data. Your data should not be polluted. Your database should not be able to be polluted. Each and every field, each and every data that goes into your database is your responsibility. You have to sanitize it, you have to validate it, and validation is a must. That is why I just kept just one full episode. See, it has been a long time, right? It has been more than 1.5 hours. I am just recording this video 1.5 hours just to teach you data validations. Just find me a course which will teach you data validation for long hours, right? Nobody, because they just cover on small things and they just move up and move out, right? But I want all my students to focus on the basics, focus on the fundamentals, focus on these small ethics, right? This is a coder's ethics. Whenever if you are a good coder, you should be validating everything. You cannot trust anything that comes from this request.body. Always make sure your patch, your put, your post APIs, whenever you are getting some data, never trust this request.body, right? Let me write a note over here, right, in your homework. never trust, right? Never in your life trust request.body, right? This request.body can get any malicious thing into your database. You never have to trust the request.body. Okay, let me make a commit just by this line, right? Just by this message over here in my never trust the request body. Let me just make a commit just by adding this line, because I feel this line is very, 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 very important for everyone, right? So never trust your request.body. Always keep validations, and that's all for this episode. If you are liking Dev Tinder, if you are liking my teaching method, if you are liking Namaste Node, then please give me a shout out on LinkedIn, on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, or other places, right? Please talk a little bit more about Namaste Node. Help us reach more people. Every post, every comment, every share will matter, right? And no matter if you have 1 follower, 10 follower, 10,000 follower, every post will matter. Please share a word about us on social media and help us reach more and more people. That is a humble request. You can also share your learnings from this episode on LinkedIn. You can even take down notes, whatever notes you have taken, post it up on LinkedIn, learn in public. That will help you increase and make your personal brand stronger. Okay, so that's all in this video. See you in the next video very soon. We will be doing a lot of crazy things in the next video. So hope to see you in the next video very soon. Till then, bye-bye.